Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. I think I'll put this one on YouTube. So it'll be an update video, but just with a little bit more in the sense that I have decided to, kind of change the agenda as much as I can from draft physics to debate physics. So I actually did buy the domain name, DebatePhysics.com. Didn't think that would still be available, but when thinking about it, of course it's available, because nobody thinks there's anything to debate, and it surprises me. But anyway, all there are in the world, it seems, are the only people that seem to wish to counter-argue anything are complete lunatics. Even people like Bill Gates. I didn't know he was a 9/11 truther. He thinks Kennedy was taken out by the government, and all kinds of conspiracies and bullshit. I mean, come on. The government can't pick up your garbage, right? I mean, the government isn't competent. It's full of a bunch of idiots. Right? People who get the job because they're friends with somebody, not because they know what the fuck they're doing. I mean, everything they do is stupid, right? I mean, they hired Pirro. The government, has like software from the 1940s because they signed some stupid contract with some company that went bankrupt 600 years ago, and and they never fix anything. They never do anything rational, because everything is a fix for, somebody's getting graft somewhere. It's somebody's friend. It's somebody's this. It's all corrupt and stinky. But it's dumb as fuck. It cannot pull off any conspiracy. Shit. How can you believe they could do anything clever? Ugh, amazingly stupid. But anyway, it's just so disappointing. So anyway, everything, the only energy for debate is all the crazy crap. It's just fringe crazy kooks, and apparently people don't want their beliefs tested. But I think there would be an audience. I really do think there'd be an audience for really well performed, let's say, counter argument, the counterpoint kind of thing, without getting personal. Now that's the tricky part, right? I mean, there's a famous kind of Saturday Night Live skit, where I think it was called Counterpoint, and it just ends up being Jane, you ignorant slut. It just it just ends up being this hostile thing. And some of that has to be included, I suppose. I mean, it's hard not to be hostile about things that just seem so destructive and dangerous and dumb and evil. I mean, selling lies and bullshit is evil. Deluding people, confusing people, cheating their brains, taking advantage, of their Alzheimer's and selling them your timeshares. This is just evil. And so much of this propaganda physics and propaganda bullshit is self-interested, for the money, for the graft. I'll get a government contract out of it. I'll be set for life. Bullshit. There's a lot of bad motives in the people defending this completely silly science. So, I mean, I probably should buy that, completelysilly.science.com. But anyway, and all the fringe characters will show up, with their wacky conspiracies. Just, well, anyway. But you can't, there's no point in even starting the list of all the dopey things people are falling for nowadays. Ugh, just pathetic. Anyway, so I guess I'll do the rundown of the week in draft physics, and then later I'll go through some of the future of what will be debated, I guess. Some brief outline of some kind of format, and as the website indicates, I will change that to $2,000, because that's what I've been offering people. and still no takers. No, I can't even get a reply back. Well, thanks for the offer, but no thanks, which is kind of funny. And I have offered, things like Joe Rogan and Veritas. I have offered $3,000 and gotten no response. $3,000. You just wonder how high the number has to go to even get a response. A turn down for the money. Just surprising. And people like Ken Wheeler have overtly declined the $2,000. It wasn't like the email didn't get to them or some other kind of crap. Actually, email corresponded with Ken Wheeler, and he wasn't interested in the $2,000. Anyway, pretty telling, I say. We'll just go through some. So the Veritasium started this week with the claim about how electricity moves through the universe, and frankly, it only moves through wires. So all you people think there's something called an electric field that it really doesn't exist. There's only charges in the universe, and charges can be arranged, and when they're in an arrangement, they can create something other things can see. Okay, they can see the pattern, but there's no field of anything but the consequences of charge. That would be a point of debate. Is there any other fields besides the consequence of how you arrange charges? And obviously, if arrangement matters, the pattern, if you move the pattern, that's going to matter also. So it's not very complicated. So apologies for the furnace noise, but it's just a practical fact. 59 degrees in here this morning. Way too cold. All right, so I would just make the simple argument, and the arguments I'm sort of trying to make is that you could have a light bulb and it's burning. Now it's full of heat, all right, and the consequence of the heat is radiation, okay, and so some of it's going to be infrared, and then some of it's going to be visible. And what you could argue is if I could collect every piece of heat, every little bit of it from every place that the heat is going out of the light bulb, I could recreate, if I could create all these little bits of infrared light and visible light, I could collect it all and focus it on a point. I could theoretically recreate the heat, okay? So I could take the heat that's here. I'm not going to move the heat from here to here. I'm going to take all of the consequence of the heat and recreate the heat here. So this is, in a sense, you're saying that there's a consequence of something happening in the universe. This moves from here to here. Well, the consequence isn't just in this dimension. You can sort of understand that this dimension has also changed. The movement has a meaning in more than one dimension. So the energy is moving in one dimension, but it's also creating movement or energy, essentially, in another dimension. So it's not like electricity is traveling outside the wire. Okay, there's obviously energy traveling inside the wire. It's just that it's creating a consequence to the rest of the universe that can be converted back into a duplication of what's happening there. So you can duplicate the movement in this wire, okay, by collecting the energy, the pattern it's creating. That is, the electrons are moving from one place to another. Those are moving charges. It's a moving pattern. This piece of metal can see the moving pattern and attempt to duplicate it. It's forced to duplicate it, and when it duplicates the pattern on the surface that is moving electrons, that ends up being electricity in the wire. So it duplicates what's happening here, okay? But the only way it can happen is you'd have to collect, the wire's round and it's radiating like this. You have to be able to collect all of it to create all of it here. You'd have to get every single bit of it. So the only thing that works is like transformers, as I explained, things that force the energy to be consolidated. So if you can't collect all of it, if you can't build a big thing around it and collect every little bit of the energy, you can't create the same amount of energy in the other wire. So if you just have two wires in space, some distance from each other, you're only getting a tiny sliver of the energy that's going this way. There's energy going this way, all kinds of ways, and you're not going to get any of that if you don't have a system for collecting it. So it would only be a tiny percentage of the electricity you can collect. That's it, tiny percentage. So it's just wrong to say the actual energy of the current, the actual motion in the wire is somehow outside the wire in a field. The consequence of the energy moving in the wire is not the energy in the wire. But it is a fact that you can take the consequence and you can duplicate what's happening based on the pattern. That happens in our universe. So it is a fact that I can collect the information, convert the information back into the source of the information, and I can in fact create two places that have that consequence. But the fact is there was movement here that was created by movement here, and it really is the same movement. So it's really that this had twice the energy to start with, in a sense, because it's obviously part of having energy is moving in 3 dimensions, and the consequence of moving in those 3 dimensions is that you're affecting all 3, because all 3 are hitting you with energy, and you will reflect back a different amount of energy if the thing is moving. There's no way to break that fact that you're changing more than just the universe this way and this way by moving. You're affecting it this way and this way and this way and that way. You're affecting the other 2 dimensions. Alright, I think that's enough of an argument. But anyway, so it's just cheating the truth. Too simplistic, too undercooked to just say something like, well, I'm going to prove that the electricity is traveling outside the wire in some sort of field, because you're not going to be able to prove that. And collecting a tiny bit of the information and converting that into a pattern or movement of electrons is not the same thing as showing, look, I collected the energy from the wire, because you didn't. Alright, anyway, so these videos are all about that. So there was one guy who, I think the arguments were almost silly in terms of calling 2 wires next to each other a capacitor. Not even close. It just breaks the word capacitor to do that kind of thing, in my opinion, blah, blah, blah. So then this EEV blog guy, so I did email him, and I didn't offer him any money. So I just said, well, what'll happen if I just don't bother with the money offer thing? And I'll just make some point that I made a response video, sorry if I was offensive, nothing personal, blah, 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 blah. And just saying, just barely encouraging, if possible, I would like to debate some of these subjects. And if you ever have the willingness to do so, let me know. Something very passive. And I get back some sort of emphatic, I don't debate, non-conventional physics theories or some kind of crap like that. And it's, yes, okay. So, what is that? Because you're a good guy, or because you're a coward? I mean, he's debating Veritas. See, the irony is, he's debating Veritasium's understanding. So it's like he will debate. It's just that, again, he'll choose who he debates. And I would say the choice is not being made based on, it's being made based on who he thinks he can beat up, rather than what needs to be debated. So anyway, yeah. So I did that video. So a couple of people not interested. I also emailed the other guy, didn't get any response from him. The old guy. I didn't figure I would. I figured he was kind of an old fart. He's not going to be able to handle it. He's probably my age, actually. but he's just not going to be able to handle it. He's thinks the world is we're living in a much slower world, kind of thing. Anyway, so then I did do a video trying to just explain this induction thing, like I just did, and illustrate that this what's happening to the field is a consequent what's happening in the wire. You can't sit there and say the movement of the electrons isn't what's happening. That's not the main event. It is the main event. The consequential event does in fact create a circumstance that can be taken advantage of. You can call it energy, but it's not the energy of the electrons moving. It's a consequence. It's an energy consequence of them moving. All right. And then light and muons. Yeah, somebody asked a question about that kind of stuff. The old video I had played before, the muon video, attempting to prove Einstein's theory, and I point out how the proof is really thin, and in some ways the mechanics is completely illogical. What they're saying is happening in the experiment doesn't make any sense, and I would like it if somebody could explain it. The trace on the oscilloscope, the idea that you have you have a vent, I already did it in the video, I won't do it again here, but I mean, it's a simple logical problem, of how the hell you could tell the difference between a decay event when it creates a photon and the event of the muon entering the scintillator, which creates a photon. How are those photons at all distinguishable? You have one device detecting a light photon. How's it going to know which one's a decay photon and which one's I entered the scintillator photon? There's no way to tell. As far as I can see, it's just a pretty illogical argument. I mean, it's a pretty flawed physical experiment. Then that's only one of the flaws. Okay, of the many flaws. All right, so I guess we'll go to the debate, some of the debate questions, and these are just ones. I spent 10 minutes just starting to write some questions, so we'll go through some of those, and so I'm just going to attempt to create a page. The page will ask these questions. I will provide a video link to my answer, and then I will provide whatever I can find on the internet as argument and counter argument. I will try to fairly present what could be called anything called an evidence or a good argument or something like that. And clearly what I would really like is for somebody with a physics degree who knows something to actually defend this nonsense physics by having to answer my questions, and explain. So that's going to be a real challenge. I'm thinking maybe I will just start to offer money, not $2,000, but something, to somebody willing to defend conventional physics, to answer the questions. So it might be difficult to find a religious person to answer some of these. If you gave them the questions ahead of time, they might evade having to answer. The simple questions like, well, if there's miracles, why aren't any of them growing a new arm? If God can do anything, why is it He never does that one? How come taking off someone's leg or arm is always a permanent thing? You never get a miracle. But cancer, you do get miracles. So how come one thing gets miracles, the other thing never gets a miracle? What's God's reasoning? What's the catch? And how isn't the obvious answer, oh, there are no miracles, it is just a pile of crap. Anyway, so it seems like, alright, so I don't know exactly what the format will be. I'll try to make it as simple as possible because the search engines can't find anything unless you make it really simple. And so I'll do some whatever Internet 1975 just so we can see just how much the internet won't index content on the internet, and that'll be useful, and such and so forth and whatnot. I'll be right back. Gotta take a little pause. Alright, should be back, and back to here and such. Alright, so I mean, some of these questions I don't think are, they shouldn't even be argued, but whatever. Everybody should be able to agree. So let's see, are there more than 3 dimensions? So I mean, the physical dimensions obviously fit, I mean, they all look exactly like each other. You can't tell one from the other. If I threw you the 3 dimensions, you wouldn't know which one was up and down and which one was left and right. I mean, you wouldn't know. They are so perfect for each other. And yet you're going to throw in there this word dimension and say there's time, or there's some other, dimensions that are doing something somehow. There's some kind of place like the 3 dimensions. I mean, should it even be debated that, well, what does the word dimension mean then? What is this dimension thing? Because time doesn't look anything like, forward and back. It really doesn't look like a physical dimension. And it certainly, you could make the logical argument that, yeah, the only thing it has in common is that way and that way, but frankly, there's nothing about it that seems to have any, spatial reality. It seems completely limited in the space of it that you get. It's this space, the present, and that's all there is. The little piece between the two are the only thing that looks like it has any dimensionality, the now, in terms of being real, and the rest of it is gone. The past is gone. It already happened. It's over. It doesn't exist anymore. Everything's moved to some new location, and the old locations are, there's no memory of them. They're not held somewhere. You can only take a Xerox. You can take a picture, a photograph, of the past, but the people aren't alive in the photograph. It's not real. So anyway, so it's almost like, it's just, nah, I shouldn't have to even debate this crap. Alright, but anyway, and then, can anything travel faster than the speed of force? So a lot of people seem interested in this faster than the force idea. And I said the speed of force because it really should be called that, because all the forces move the speed of force, not the speed of light, the speed of force. And light is just one of the forces. It's just a manifestation of the force, the stuff in the field, and there's only one field of energy, of little bits moving the speed of force. And so there's arguments to be made that, no, there's no evidence that anything can move faster. And if you understand that the matter is essentially gaining its momentum, F equals change in momentum, as Newton would say, that the force is giving matter its momentum. If the force isn't going faster than the speed of force, then I guess the matter can't possibly go faster than it either. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. Just from our, again, 3-dimensional world, we can't make things go faster unless we use some trick, like a lever or some other kind of mechanism to subvert the reality, to to make change the circumstances. The raw circumstances don't allow it. You can't give something more velocity. You can't store the energy naturally. You have to create hardware to do that. Okay, is there any real pull in the universe? So this one, again, is there's the argument is that gravity is some mysterious force of, that's pulling something into something, and I think the obvious counter argument would be, no, the universe is pushing stuff into other stuff, and there's no pull anywhere. All you do is not have a counter force. So wherever you eliminate the counter force, then the force, okay, wins, because there's nothing pushing back. So if you just eliminate the other push, then you have something that'll look like a pull, but nothing got pulled, it just got pushed. And you could sort of make some arguments about how everything that somebody would call a pull, you could make a good argument about how it's really just a push. Like pulling a door open by pushing on the back of the doorknob. Those kind of obvious and substantial counter arguments to the existence. And once you understand the universe is just pressure, it's like a vessel with pressure in it, and everything is functioning in that pressure. The field isn't a dead field. The field is actively pushing. And all you really do is change that by taking the push that's here and moving it over here. So you're creating twice as much push over here and no push back over here. You're just changing the arrangement, the distribution of the pressure. By changing the distribution, that is having twice as much one place and half as much somewhere else, is what creates what we call the action. Alright, is there any substance besides bits of force and bits of matter? Is there anything else in the universe besides what we would call the photons type things, or virtual photons, as physics uses that kind of terminology? But the stuff moving the speed of light. There's the stuff moving the speed of light that carries momentum. They can't really deny it has momentum. I mean, they pretend it doesn't have any mass, but that's rest mass. So they give it a mass when it's moving the speed of light. Can't make much sense out of that, but whatever. The point is, it's momentum. And that's it. That's all there is. There's the matter clumps, the electrons and protons. You can give them momentum, which gives the atom momentum, which gives the molecule momentum, which gives the compound momentum, which gives the whole big giant object momentum. So I guess the other thing to put in here is that whole argument about, is there any other universe than the small universe? That is, the universe the electrons and protons are in is the real universe, and all the other universes, are manifestations. They're just projections. They're just images of what's happening in that real universe, the small one. Everything that happens in the big universe happened first in the small universe. If you could see the action in the small universe, you could predict everything that's happening in the big universe, is the simple argument. Alright, isn't weight. So this is just the most egregious and obvious evil. And it's an evil ignorance, it's an evil nonsense, because it's so egregiously bad. The science of the kinetic energy formula is so egregiously bad. It's so illogical on its face. It's nonsensical, and they lie so gratuitously about how they have any kind of good reasoning or good mathematics or good anything to justify this silly nonsense belief. I mean, it's so bad. They've done so little investigation. They won't have any kind of honest conversation about it. This is, it just needs to be debated, in the sense, just debate the history, just debate Leibniz's own words, the guy who created this nonsense, and then just debate the experiments. Anyway, isn't weight just mass in motion? So, simple. You can't get it. What is weight? Weight is, we say gravity gave us weight. Well, how does it give us weight? Well, it moves us into the earth, right? That's how we measure the weight, is that we try to stop it from moving. Isn't that how you measure the weight? You stop it from moving? So the earth is stopping you from moving. It's pushing back, quite obviously. You had to push into the earth for the earth to push back, right? The earth couldn't push back if you didn't push into it, right? The earth isn't very smart. It can't know ahead of time, I'm going to push back before you push into me. Well, obviously that can't happen. So you obviously did push into the earth. So you obviously have motion. And that's what gives you weight. And I can duplicate your your weight by just giving you motion sideways in exactly the same speed that I give you motion downward, and I could weigh you sideways and you would weigh exactly the same amount going this way as you weigh going into the earth. It's clearly just the same thing. So clearly weight is a definition of your motion. And what's the definition of your motion? Is your momentum. So the next thing is saying, isn't mass moving just momentum? So obviously weight is a measure of momentum. You're measuring something's momentum by measuring its weight. You're measuring its mass and velocity. All right. You're measuring its mass moving. All right. Doesn't force just equal momentum? Yeah, so let's just get this over with. F equals change in your momentum. You want to know how much of a force acted on you? Well, how much did your momentum change? And you'll know exactly how much force acted on you. All right, that's what Newton said. That's what Descartes said. And Leibniz, the religious kook, countered that. He didn't win the argument in his own lifetime. He got buried as a nobody. And, this was all resurrected, by, little phantasmagorical modernists. Yeah. This is crystal physics. This isn't, new age physics. All right, isn't energy just momentum or the amount of force or an amount of weight? So force equals weight equals work equals momentum equals whatever the last energy. It's all the same thing. All right, I did a video on that title, so that would clearly be in the debate. All right, are there any other physical particles of matter besides electrons and protons? So if we want to talk about a particle, so we can say particles of force, but bits of momentum I think are safer. And yeah, just understanding that there's nothing else physically here. So if you take the forces out, what do you have making up all of the matter? Well, all you really know that you have are electrons and protons. Do you really believe in neutrinos and all the other pixie particles? There's no place for them in the electron. You still have a periodic table. Why doesn't the periodic table have the number of positrons inside the atom? Or the number of neutrinos? Or the number of... All of these things are supposed to have mass. Well, where's their indication that they have mass in the periodic table? It doesn't seem to acknowledge the existence of that mass. Come on. There's really no room for any of that stuff. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't fit in the model of an atom. So again, that's an argument to be had, that there isn't any real good physical evidence for any of this stuff. You believe in quarks because they told you that quarks exist. You haven't seen any data that says they exist. You haven't even seen the little trace, through the cloud chamber. And let's understand what the cloud chamber is. It's not a very good device for seeing tiny bits of energy, right? You sort of have to understand that it doesn't take a tiny bit of energy to smash into a bunch of atoms, create ions that are now reflecting photons to your eyes, okay? Millions, billions of photons. That's a train wreck, okay? To create an image in a cloud chamber is a train wreck of energy. It's not a car accident. It's not a quark. Anyway, are protons bent by gravity? Are photons bent by gravity? So this, the evidence is so crappy. So you can get into all the lensing images that all don't make mathematical sense. And now they say dark matter fixes them. So they're conceding that their lensing images are less than perfect because they're using it as an argument for dark matter to say that, well, look, if we believe in dark matter, then we can explain these wacky, silly lensing images that are all bent, crooked, and funky looking. They can't explain them mathematically unless they do shove some sort of funky gravity in there. And then you have the bad Eddington experiment, and then the whole idea that NASA has, by the testimony of a 25-year employee, they've never seen anything like a photon being bent outside the corona or the lamb of the sun. So outside a radius distance, they haven't seen anything. They haven't seen light do anything unusual. It's a real argument. Okay, Eddington was never redone. They never did it from space. They really don't have any good evidence to show you of photons being bent by gravity. Not being bent by scatter, not being bent by fog. Right? We all know fog bends photons. Right? They go all over the place. So shooting light through fog and then saying the gravity did it, that wouldn't be a rational argument. That wouldn't be a way of saying, well, we have corroborating evidence that light is bent by gravity because it's bent by fog. I mean, that wouldn't be a very good argument, would it? All right. So, I mean, this is just, anyway. It's like, again, these are subjects that you almost shouldn't have to argue, in the sense I shouldn't have to argue this extreme confidence that the other side is projecting these arguments with. They should be able to concede that, yeah, we really don't have much evidence and we don't have any reasoning. So the real point, again, about the light bending thing is to go the second step. I mean, Einstein's assertion is that photons are bent twice as much as regular matter. It's not just that they're bent twice as much. And what would the theory be? What would the theoretical reasoning be? Why would a photon, the fastest thing in the universe, the smallest, lightest, almost vaporous thing in the universe, why would it be bent more? I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense. The fastest thing is bent more? Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. You can't, it just doesn't logically, you're just saying, and you're confident? You've never seen a picture of it bent twice as much. So, I mean a real picture of the light actually being bent by anything called the gravity. All right, and all the evidence, again, indicates that no force interacts with a force. So if a proton has a charge, the charge force that it's radiating, you could argue, can't interact with any other field energy. The charge force has to go all the way to the electron and hit the electron. It can't do anything against another force. A force can't bang into a force. The force has to bang into the other piece of matter. So that's the interaction that exists between force and matter. Forces tell matter where to go, and when matter goes somewhere, it changes the field of the force. That's the idea. And that is consistent in all the evidence. You can't bang two laser beams into each other and create anything. Unless there's a particle of dust or a piece of matter, you can't make the photons interact. They have to have the conduit of a piece of matter. They can't be bent by forces of gravity, of magnetism, of electricity, any force you want to invent. Okay, they're all the same thing. But you can't bend it with that. That's what all the evidence indicates, all the good evidence. All right, so getting to that point, I'd say, is there an electric field? Because what would the electric field be? I mean, where's the evidence of it? I mean, electricity you can understand. I can understand atoms, moving their electrons moving in atoms. You can understand that. You can understand them moving in one direction and collecting somewhere. You can understand that, the electrons. But there's no understanding of what an electric field would be, because there's no evidence that one exists. The only time electricity goes from one place to another is it has to create a conductor. Lightning makes a conductor in the atmosphere. It doesn't make a very good one. That's why it's all jaggedy. It's because it doesn't make a very good conductor. But it has to make one. It has to make a wire, essentially, to be able to get from one place to another. It has to use atoms to transfer the energy. And that's the evidence. You can't just magically say, I'm going to send it the energy. And it just doesn't happen that way. You can't get the spark without the conductor. Okay, and it's essentially sparks that are traveling through the wire. So when you have two wires, with a gap, and you have a bunch of sparks that fly out, well, that's actually what's in the wires. Is a bunch of sparks. The wire's doing exactly the same thing as the sparky stuff you see. It's just that it's not making light and doing that stuff because it's in a container. But the same thing is happening inside the wire. It's a bunch of chaos almost. It's a bunch of stuff trying to find the shortest path. Trying to find a path through the pressure of the electrons, and it moves them in lots of different ways before it gets them to go in the right direction. Anyway, is there a magnetic field? So you could argue that that's the more obvious one that exists because magnets are obviously making a field. But the argument is if you go a little deeper, you could understand that what the magnet's really doing is just showing you electrons and protons in a different pattern. The atoms have all positioned themselves where their electrons and protons are specific in how they're pointing. And by pointing in a pattern, another magnet can see the pattern. And that's why magnetism only works on magnets, is because only magnets can see the pattern. You have to be arranged in a pattern to be able to see the pattern, essentially. Yeah, I guess that's a way of saying it. All right, anyway, so that's some preliminary points to argue, some issues. I will add more as required. If you wish to submit suggestions, you can post a message in the forum. You can send an email. You can post a message in the comments on YouTube. But there's lots of options for you to make your contribution. If you wish to preserve the integrity of your beloved science, please just try to make your argument without being gratuitously and pointlessly insulting. Try to do it in some manner that's not full of accusations you can't prove. And let's understand the standard. I mean, we have the standard of Veritasium with millions of subscribers saying we have been lied to. Okay, not that all your professors were idiots. He didn't even say that. He said they were liars. Called them liars. Okay, not idiots, liars. Anyway, but yeah, let's try to rise above. Let's try to do it a little better than that standard. Let's try to do our agreeable disagreeing. Clearly, you might think I'm dangerous because I'm making arguments that are somehow... what I can say for sure is there's nobody... I don't have a little earphone in my ear and I'm doing some stunt, to prove I can heal people or something. I'm just making what I'll tell you quite overtly, completely sincere arguments. I think your physics is not the truth. It's not even close to the truth. I honestly believe it's really bad evidence, okay? The clay experiments of the 1700s to prove kinetic energy, and the even worse experiment of dropping things in sand. I mean, you can understand that simple counter argument, right? That fast things lose their energy really fast. So they move the things they hit more quickly, but they don't have more energy. Again, if a 10-ton train going 5 miles an hour hits me, yeah, I only leave at 5 miles an hour. So it's less of an impact for me personally. But you could understand that the train lost less energy when it only made me go 5 miles an hour. And the 5-ton train going 10 miles an hour made me fly away at 10 miles an hour. It gave me more energy. So it lost more energy. So it loses its energy quicker. Yes, it made me fly further away. It doesn't mean that it has more energy, because the 10-ton train will hit a lot more people. And that's the simple truth. The lighter train runs out of energy quicker. because it's giving away more with each impact. I mean, the logic is so obvious and so indestructibly clean, you know. Just shouldn't be an argument. I mean, a rational person should just concede. Okay, yes, this was some bad physics. It was really wrong to sit there and say, oh, because something goes farther, it had more energy. When you know it really has to do with how many hills did it climb, how many this. I mean, there's lots of variables that are going to decide, and the only decision isn't how far it went; it's how fast it went. You know, and how many times and how much energy it had left over after it went. Lots of things. Anyway. So, but anyway, so the point will be is to be fair, okay? Fair to the arguments, fair to the physics, fair to the physicists, as fair as possible. Now, I don't think I'm being unfair when, like Leibniz, for example, overtly said to Newton and to the Descartesians, your physics is too atheist. Okay, he said these words. All right, that's not showing good scientific character. Okay, to argue because your science is coming up with answers that don't praise God, that's not good science. And you should be able to admit, yeah, that's not necessarily a scientist you want to trust. One who's saying your answers don't match God's answers. You know, that's a dangerous scientist. Come on. All right. Yeah, I've already made some of these arguments, but yes, we'll try to make them all very concise, right to the point. Try to get to all of that stuff. Try to find quotes out of Wikipedia, I suppose. You know, we can't be publishing the whole article, but if there's different places that have a counter argument, please quote the text, quote the arguments, and I will address them. Okay, so I will defend all of the dissenters from the truth you're preaching. You're suggesting a Jesus theory. You're coming to, say, North America, to the North American Indians, and you're going to convince them of your Jesus. I'm just going to protect these Indians, okay, from being misled by letting them know there is a better explanation, or another explanation, you know, called evolution. And, you know, this, that, and that. Now, I'm just going to point out how their physics, what they state to be true, isn't well evidenced, and it isn't logical, and it isn't well reasoned, and even their math is horrible mush. Some percentage of it. I mean, 2 plus 2, okay, pretty good. But all the other crap, not so good. They're Hamiltonians, and they're Lagrangians and Lagrangians, all that stuff is all based on, you know, 1/2 mv squared, and that's a loser. That's a bit of poison. Anyway. Alright, so coming attraction, I'm going to attempt to find somebody to debate. I mean, there's got to be somebody willing to defend the conventional theory, and preferably be able to defend it by making video content, making disciplined arguments about why my reasoning is incorrect, and why people should be quite confident that mv squared is the right answer. Okay. Yeah, so enough of a video. I think, yeah, 48 minutes, that's enough. Yeah, we'll see where it goes. So the videos will be, I'll just have the titles will be different, right? So if I can actually get, if the videos relevant to the debate website will be called DebatePhysics instead of DraftPhysics, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah, but really the focus is just to move to the debate physics portion of the show. I think I've done my job in the last, 10, 12 years. I've acquired enough competence and enough knowledge to now assert. Okay, it's not draft anymore. It's a well-developed mechanical model, and I can defend it, and I can certainly show it to be much more evidenced and reasonable than their theories, their model. Okay, so that will be the task. So, till the next time and such, this has been a DraftPhysics.com video presentation. Yuck. Reluctantly on the YouTube horrible censored platform.